Hey folks, in this video we're going to be learning how to import data into Python's Pandas data analytics library. This is going to be building on my beginner's tutorial that outlines some fundamentals that I think are key to working with Pandas. So if you are a complete beginner, I'd probably recommend checking that out so that you are aware of some of the methods that we use in today's video. We're going to be focusing on four strategies for importing data into Pandas. The first will be reading from a Google Sheet. The second will be reading from a CSV that has been uploaded to Google Drive. The third will be reading an Excel file from your local machine. And the final method will be reading from a PDF that has been uploaded to Drive. I just want to note, I do not leverage this strategy in my day-to-day, and it's something that I researched just for this video. I have ingested PDFs in the past, but I haven't done it in several years. And when I was researching this strategy, I observed some fringe issues relating to the alignment of data in columns. So if you do attempt this method and you come up with issues, please reach out in the comments or send me an email. I'd be glad to help you with it, specific to your case. And I do plan to research reading from PDFs further. But in the event that this is what you're looking to do, I just wanted to provide that caveat so that you don't, have unrealistic expectations. This does work, but I just want to let you know that I did observe some issues in my research. Additionally, I just want to note that today's lesson is going to be focused on working within Google's Collaboratory Notebook. That means that there are going to be native credential and authorization lines of code in here that only work with Collaboratory. So if you're working in an external IDE, some of these methods will not work for you. You'll have to go to Google Cloud Platform, create a project, and extract credentials with the necessary APIs that you need. I plan to record a follow-up video, so please check out my channel, and hopefully it's uploaded by then. But with that out of the way, we are going to begin. One of the requirements for this lesson will be a Google Sheet with data. So this is what I'm going to be working off of. At present, I don't have a PDF, I don't have a CSV, and I don't have an Excel file. What I'm going to be doing is downloading those file types from this Google Sheet. So, I don't have Excel on this machine. It doesn't matter. We just need the file type to load it into our Python notebook. So with that out of the way, let's begin. So we're going to be working out of Google Drive. Make sure you have that open. Additionally, make sure that you have Google Collaboratory downloaded. You can see if you have it by going to the upper left-hand corner of your screen, selecting New, navigating to More, and then Collaboratory should be here. If you don't have Collaboratory, you can download it using Connect More Apps. So you just have to search for Colab, install it, and then it will appear here. I'm going to open up a new Collaboratory workbook. And then I am going to rename my notebook, Importing Data into Pandas. I'm going to manually engage my runtime, which will provide us a connection to Google's compute engine. We are going to, well, at least I'm going to add a new text cell just so that you can kind of see where I'm at in the process. And we are going to begin by pip installing some packages. So pip allows you to install external packages. So we're going to use an exclamation point to engage pip, and we're just going to type pip. So we're going to hit space, and then we're going to use install, and then we are going to type gspread 2 5.4.0. The reason that we're doing this is because the native gspread package within Colab is version 3.4.2, I believe. And that version of gspread does not have some functions that I think are excellent and are pivotal in my use of gspread. So the earliest version, I believe, that has those functions is 5.4.0. I believe gspread is up to version 6.0. And you know, I'm currently using 6.0 in some of my projects, but at bare minimum, you just need 5.4.0. We're going to hit space, and then we are going to install Camelot-py. Camelot is the library that we will be using in order to read PDFs. So once you have this typed out, you can run your cell. I just did so by hitting Command Enter. You can also manually push the play button. And as long as it's doing this, that means it's running. And then once you get a check mark over here, that's when you know that you have successfully compiled that cell. So you can see that we get some output where it's telling us what it's doing. So it's collecting gspread, it's collecting Camelot. It looks to see what dependencies it needs to have in there. And then if you see down here, we have an uninstall of gspread. That's because gspread 3.4.2 was downloaded, so we uninstalled that so that we could successfully install gspread 5.4.0 as well as Camelot 0.11. We're going to move to the next section of our lesson, which is import libraries for Google Drive access. So before we begin with our next code cell, I just want to let you know that the way that I've structured this lesson is we are going to front load the importing of our libraries. So I'm trying to organize it based upon the libraries you need for working with Google Drive and the ones that you need for gspread and so on. But there is some overlap relative to oAuth and credentials and all that type of stuff. So I wanted to order them in one place. That way we don't have to import things. In the event that you want to just work with Google Drive or just work with Google Sheets, you can go to the code snippet section here, and Colab will have some boilerplate code that you can paste in. So a lot of this stuff here is what we're going to be doing. I just wanted to organize it in a different way because, like I said, there's some overlap. But if you just want to work with Sheets and you don't want to deal with the next section where I'm going to be like writing out all these lines of code, you can skip ahead if you want to. Now, there are some things that I'm doing that is not native to that boilerplate, but if you're just kind of looking for some inspiration on how to start experimenting with this stuff, you could use those code snippets, cut down on this portion of the video, and then just start working with your data. But with that said, I am going to take a couple minutes here to import our library so that we can access Google Drive using PyDrive and access Google Sheets using gspread. And additionally, we're going to get our credentials and our authorization so that we can read from Google Drive and Google Sheets. So we're going to begin with a comment. That's why I put a hash there. And I'm going to say import PyDrive and associated libraries. So we're going to do from PyDrive.auth import Google auth. And you can see it's capital G Google, capital A auth. I'm going to hit space and hit enter. I'm going to scroll down just a little bit. We're going to type from PyDrive.drive space import capital G Google, capital D drive space enter. We're going to type from Google.colab space import auth, comma, files, space. Hit enter. From oAuth to client.client import Google credentials, capital G, Google, capital C, credentials. I'm going to hit 2 enters. I'm going to add a hash for another comment, and then we are going to authenticate and create the PyDrive client. We're going to hit enter, and then we're going to do auth.authenticate user, open parentheses, go to the right, hit enter. Then we are going to create a gauth variable. So we're going to say gauth space equal to space capital G Google capital A auth open parentheses. We're going to go to the right of that. We're going to hit enter. And then we are going to access our credentials using gauth.credentials space equal sign space capital G Google capital C credentials dot get underscore application underscore default. And then you're going to want to have open parentheses. Then we're going to create a drive variable, which we will need to use anytime that we want to access Google Drive. So we're going to call it drive, and we're going to set it equal to capital G Google, capital D drive, open parentheses, and then pass gauth. We're going to run this code block, and then we are going to allow access to our Google credentials, which will allow us to read and write from Drive. Cool. So you can see this was successful. In the event that this was not successful for you, pause the video and then read over this code. All of this is case sensitive. So if you're missing any of the capitalization here or any of these values are capitalized over here, you'll have an error. Once you're ready to go, we're going to create a new text cell. I'm going to scroll down. So this is your last chance to pause the video if there's anything you want to look at on the screen. And then we are going to begin our next section, which is going to import libraries for GSpread. GSpread is a library that allows us to read and write to Google Sheets. Cannot thank the developers of GSpread enough. It is a wonderful library that I use every single day. So we're going to begin with a hash symbol, and then we are going to import GSpread. We're going to hit enter, and we are going to import GSpread. Hit enter, and we're going to say from google.auth import default space, hit enter twice, do a hash symbol, and then we are going to create our auth and our creds. So we're going to say auth.authenticate underscore user with open parentheses. We're going to hit enter, and then we're going to type creds with a comma and a space, use an underscore, and then we're going to use an equal sign, and then we're going to type default with open parentheses. We're going to run our cell. We don't have any errors. And now we are going to import pandas. So you don't have to put all this stuff into its own cells, but I just wanted to, oh, you know what? I'm going to keep that there just in case there's anything you want to add in. We don't have to do this, but I kind of just like segmenting it because I hope that it's easier for you to digest all of the things that we have to do for this. So if you do have any feedback about this, please let me know in the comments. This one's super simple. We're just going to say import pandas space as PD, and then we're going to run our cell, and we're good to go. Cool. So I'm going to create some new text blocks. So if there is anything that you need on the screen, pause it now. Otherwise, we're going to move into our first module, which is how to read from a Google Sheet. So I'm going to scroll down now. I'm going to add a new text cell, and I'm going to say how to read from a Google Sheet. And then I am going to add a new code block, scroll down a little bit more. And the first thing that I'm going to do is engage the credentials. So we're going to be doing that by creating a variable. I'm going to call that variable access. This is just the name that I use. You can call it whatever you want to. But we are going to engage the gspread library. We're going to use a dot, and then we are going to say authorize. We're going to have open parentheses, and then we are going to pass our creds to that those open parentheses. I'm going to hit enter. And now we are going to start accessing our workbook. So we are going to say access the workbook, hit enter. We're going to begin by declaring a variable. I'm going to call it WB, which stands for workbook. I'm going to set it equal to our access variable dot, and then I'm going to use open underscore by key. You can see there's also an open by URL function here. You can use whatever you want to. I prefer to use open by key for readability purposes. So I'm going to use open by key. I'm going to have empty parentheses, and then you can see its requirement is just passing an ID through a string. So I'm going to add single quotes in there, and then I'm going to navigate to my Google Sheet. And the key, also known as the workbook ID, is accessible in the URL in this portion of the string. So I'm just going to copy it. I'm going to go back to my workbook, and I'm going to paste it in there. I'm going to hit enter, and the next thing that we're going to do is access the sheet by ID. So this is where we are going to use the sheet ID in order to access the place that has the data that we want to collect. So we're going to create a variable. I'm just going to call it sheet, and then we're going to reference our WB variable. And I'm going to say get underscore worksheet underscore by ID, and then we're going to have an empty parentheses. So the sheet ID exists in the URL next to the GID equal sign. If you're accessing sheet 1, which is what I'm doing here, then it's always going to be 0. But if you're working with a sheet that is not sheet 1, then you are going to have a unique ID, and you can find it at the very end of your string. So regardless what it is, copy it, and let's go back to our Colab notebook, and then enter it into worksheet ID. Because this is a number, you do not need single quotes. You should not have single quotes, or so that you don't need them. Don't put them there, it won't work. So we're going to hit enter, and then we are going to get the data. So I'm going to show you 2 different methods for getting data dependent upon what you need. The first one I'm going to show you is the one that I use. So we're just going to create a variable. I'm going to call it data. You can call it whatever you want to. We're going to set it equal to sheet.get underscore all underscore records. and then we're going to have open parentheses. So the result of this function, the get all records, is that your data will be returned as a dictionary. So I'm going to print data for you just so that you can see. And the way that you know it's a dictionary is because we have this curly bracket here, right? So if I scroll down, you can see we have curly brackets here. So we have our keys, which is country, and then a value, and then we have a name, and then we have a value, and so on and so forth. So when we go to pass the data variable into a data frame, we will do so by doing df is equal to pd dot capital D data capital F frame, and then we're going to pass data into it. So when we print df, you'll see that we have our dictionary up here because we're using get all records, and then we have our headers in the columns position. So you can see that our first row is values, and our headers are in place. Now, another method that you have is I'm going to rewrite my data variable. I'm going to write sheet.get underscore all underscore values. If you use get all values, then you're going to return a list of lists, which is also known as a two-dimensional array. So when I rerun this cell, you can see that we are no longer getting a dictionary. We're now getting a list of lists. And the way that you can tell this is a list of lists is because you have these two square brackets at the beginning. So you have a list filled with lists, right? So you can see this is one list here, and then this is another list here. And the impact of passing a list of lists into a pandas data frame is that what was previously known as our headers or our columns now appear as values in our data frame. So there are going to be times where you want to use get all values, such as like you get somebody else's workbook and they have a merge on the first row, so you don't really have headers there. You might want to use get all values as a way to collect just the data that you need, and then you can clean it up in the data frame so that you move this row out of the values into the header. That's something that I'll touch on in other videos. But I just wanted you to know that from a fundamental perspective, when you're working with data from a Google Sheet that you want to pass into a Pandas data frame, there are two primary ways that you're going to use. Get all records, which will give you a dictionary, and get all values, which will give you a list of lists. Cool. So we're going to move on to our next module, which is how to read from a CSV file on Drive. So we're going to add another code block, and I'm going to scroll down. And we are going to begin by collecting the ID of the CSV file. So we're going to save that to a variable, which will be called CSV underscore ID, and we're going to set that to a string. Now, I don't have a CSV file yet. So what I'm going to do, and if you don't have one, follow along, I'm going to go up to File, I'm going to go to Download, and then I'm going to download a CSV file. I'm going to go back to my project folder. I'm going to hit Shift-U. I'm on a Mac. I don't know if that works on Windows, but that's how I am able to load a file to Drive. I'm going to select my file. You can also drag and drop. A lot of my peers like to do that. And then we're going to double click on our CSV file. And we are going to go up to the upper right-hand corner and we are going to select share. And then we are going to copy the link. So we're going to close out of this, go back to our folder, and then we're going to go back to our notebook. We're going to paste that link in there, and then we're going to remove the link like this, or the beginning of the link and the end of the link, so that we just have the ID of the CSV. We're going to hit enter, and then we're going to add a comment, and we are going to quote unquote create the file in runtime. So what we're going to do is create a variable, which I'm going to call as file create, and we're going to set it equal to drive dot capital C create capital F file. And then we're going to have an open parentheses, and we're going to pass a dictionary into the create file function. We're going to begin with a single quote, and then we're going to type the word ID, and then we're going to go to the right of our single quotes, and we're going to enter a colon. We're going to hit space, and then we're going to pass in that CSV underscore ID. Now, one moment, I just want to note where this drive came from. I'm going to scroll up back to our section where we imported PyDrive. So bear with me for one moment here. You'll remember that when we imported PyDrive and its associated libraries, we established a variable called drive, which leveraged the Google Drive library that we imported from PyDrive. And the reason that we needed Google Drive was because we needed to pass our credentials through oAuth so that we could read and write from Google Drive, which is what we're going to be doing here. We're going to be leveraging PyDrive in order to look for a file, the CSV, that has the ID that we're passing in via the create file function. So that's what's happening here, is we are leveraging a PyDrive function in order to quote unquote create a file. We're not really going to be creating this file. It's only going to be existing in our runtime. So if you go to the left of your screen like I just did, you can select this file icon, and then you'll see this section over here that has files. So we are going to go back to our cell. We're going to hit enter twice, and we are going to create the file in runtime. Sorry, I guess I already said that, but whatever, you get it. We're going to hit enter, and we are going to do file underscore create. So we're going to be calling that file create variable that we just created. And we're going to use dot, and then we're going to say capital G get, capital C content, capital F file. And then we are going to use a parentheses. So what this allows us to do is name the file. So you're going to need single quotes, and then I'm just going to call this example.csv. You can literally call this whatever you want to. It just has to be whatever name you want to, .csv. And then once I run this cell, you're going to see that example.csv, or whatever you named this file that you're quote unquote creating, will appear over here. So I'm going to use Command Enter to run my cell, and you can see it processed, and then within a moment we should see example.csv in our file runtime. I'm going to try refreshing, and then there we go. You can see. So now we have quote unquote created a new CSV called example CSV. Now I just want to note, that's not the name of the CSV that you uploaded to your Google Drive, right? You have now created a virtual version leveraging the data from within that CSV file, so that now you can use the pandas function called .read CSV in order to read the contents of it. So that's what we're going to do here. Pass the quote unquote created file into pandas. So we're going to call this df again for data frame, and we're going to say pd.read underscore CSV, and then we're going to use open parentheses, and then we're going to, whatever you called this. So whatever your CSV file is called over here, that's what you're going to be passing right here. And then I am going to print the data frame. And when we do that, you can see that we're getting the exact same thing as when we read from our Google Sheet. Now, one note that I want to make about my reuse of the df variable, this is a tutorial. This is a sandbox. So the reason that I'm using df as a variable is because it stands for data frame and it's very simple. When you start working in your projects, and let's say that you did something where, like, hypothetically you have a data frame up here that you're reading from a Google Sheet, and then you have a different file that you're reading from a CSV or from another Google Sheet, make sure that you robustly name your variables. One of the primary actions that a Python developer can take, or a Python practitioner can take, is having readable code. You're going to write stuff, and then you're going to go away, and then you're going to have to come back to it at some point in time. And you're going to want to be able to easily scan things so that you know what's going on. So, if you were like actually working in a Python environment, I would say call this df underscore sheet, right? And then we'll change this just for the purposes, df sheet, and then you can call this df underscore CSV, and then change this. That way you can differentiate between what you're working with, right? So the takeaway here is be articulate. Be as articulate as you can be in your variable naming. Your peers will love you, and your future self will love you. Cool. So with that out of the way, we are going to add another text file, and this will focus on how to read an Excel file from your local machine. So I'm just going to be honest, I don't really love this strategy. Working with Excel files can be a little bit challenging because they are typically hosted on someone's local device. So if one of your collaborators is working an Excel file, they usually have to send it to you for you to have access to it, unless if you leverage a cloud solution like SharePoint. I do have solutions for reading Excel files from SharePoint. They're really just kind of like research type of things. They're not really in production, you know what I mean? Where like I have pipelines that are using Excel workbooks. Typically, I am, reading from an Excel file on my local machine. I don't think I have any workflows where somebody sends me an Excel file, but in the event that somebody does send you an Excel file and you want to get it into Sheets, this is one way that you could do it. So we're going to begin by upload the file. So we're going to create a variable called uploaded, and we're going to set it equal to files.upload. So we're going to hit enter, and then we're going to programmatically call the name. So we are going to save this to a variable called file name, and we are going to reference that uploaded variable that we just created. But before I show you how we're going to do this, I want you to see what happens when you upload something. So I'm going to print our file name, which is really just the uploaded variable. We're going to run it, and then it's going to say choose files. And actually, I apologize. Before we choose our files, we have to actually have an Excel file. I forgot about that. So we're going to go back to our Google Sheet. My apologies for jumping around like this. And we're going to go up to File, and then we are going to download an Excel file. And now it's on my local machine. So I can go back to my notebook. If you don't have it running already, hit run here, and then you can choose the file that you want to upload. So I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to open it. And then you can see what happened is it's recognizing the name of the file, right? So it's automateddeck.xlsx. And then you can see down here, it's printing file name, and it comes back as a dictionary. And you can tell it's a dictionary because it has curly brackets there. And then I don't know what this is, so I'm going to say something, and I apologize if I'm wrong. Let me know in the comments. I think this is UTF-8. That's how Excel files are structured, but I don't actually know what I'm talking about, so that's a total shot in the dark. So what I want to do now is I want to convert this dictionary into a list. So I'm going to wrap that uploaded variable with a list function or a list method. I apologize. I don't know the difference between the two. We're going to run it again. You don't have to do this. I just want you to see what I'm doing. So you can sit back if you want to, or you can follow along. So I'm going to choose that same file again. So I'm going to select the Excel file. And then you can see now, instead of it appearing as a dictionary, we're now getting a list. So now that it's a list, I can access that name using a square bracket and a 0. And then I'm going to upload it again. I apologize. I'm probably going to upload it like a few times, so you don't have to follow me every single time I do it. But now what we're getting here is the name of the Excel file. And this is going to be important when we want to feed this to Pandas read Excel function. You're going to need the name of your Excel file. So this is a way for us to programmatically extract the Excel file regardless of what the name is. We just are going to get it automatically as part of the upload process. Cool. So the next thing that we are going to do is specify the sheet. So we can call this sheet and set it equal to, in this case, my sheet is just called sheet 1. So you can go to your either your Excel file, or if you're using the sheets like I did, you can just, whatever the name is here, collect that and then enter that as your sheet name. I'm going to close this because we don't need it anymore. And now we are going to read, we're going to add a comment, and then we are going to read the Excel file using Pandas. So we are going to use df, and then in line with my robust variable naming, I'm going to do df underscore Excel, and I'm going to set it equal to pd.read underscore Excel, and then I'm going to use parentheses, and then I'm going to pass another pd.excel capital F file, and then we're going to have parentheses, and then I'm going to pass file underscore name, and I'm going to use square brackets and a 0 so that we programmatically extract the name. I'm going to go in between our two parentheses here. I'm going to use comma, and then I'm going to say sheet underscore name is equal to sheet. I'm going to hit enter, and then I'm going to print the data frame. And I'm going to say print df underscore Excel. And now when I run it, it's going to ask me to choose a file. I promise this is the last time we have to do this. I'm going to upload that Excel file. This one you should do. And then you can see that we are getting the data from our Excel file. You also have the ability, if you wanted to upload your file up top here, and then you could go over here and you could copy the path to your Excel file. And I think I'm going to comment this out. You don't have to do this. I'm just going to try this out and see if it works. I'm going to comment that out, and then I'm going to remove this portion of Excel file. And I'm going to try, my apologies, I'm going to pass it as a string in here. And I'm going to try running this. And then you can see that also works, right? So it's tough because, like, regardless of what option you use, you're going to have to manually upload the file. And the other challenge with it, and this is the same thing with the CSV, is that these files exist while your runtime is engaged. But the second that your runtime is disengaged, I forget whether that's when you close the notebook or when you, are out of the notebook for an extended period of time, all of this stuff gets erased once the runtime stops. So basically, this is acting as temporary memory for the entire time that you're engaged. But the second that it turns off, it removes these files. So you have to upload CSV and Excel every time. Now, the nice thing with the CSV is that when you script it, like we did here, it'll just run, so you don't manually have to do anything. But the challenge with the Excel one is that, yeah, it's just kind of like you have to do it. Now, the other option is, I work in a company that is largely Google Drive. So, the majority of the time people are using Sheets. But there are some times where people will upload an XLSX file to Google Drive. And I have a couple systems for extracting that data. I wanted to get it into this video, but I didn't come up with a solution that I thought was straightforward. But if you do need it, reach out in the comments, send me an email, and I'll gladly send you what I have. And maybe I'll do a follow-up video on it at some point. But to recap, there are two options for reading an Excel file from local. Number one, you can leverage this code base here, right, or this code block here, where you are, calling the file name. You're manually pushing the file name with a button here, or you can upload the file here and then click on these three buttons, copy the path, and then paste it as a string in here. And it looks like I commented out sheet 1, so I don't think you need this portion of it, regardless of what you're working on, but you can play around with it. Anyway, this is the code that you can use to accomplish this in the event that you want to. Cool, so we're going to move on to the final portion of our lesson. I'm going to close our files because we don't need that portion. We're going to create a new text cell, and we are going to learn how to read from a PDF. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I'm not as confident in this strategy as I am with the other ones. That's because I don't use it, and I am, just scratching the surface on my research with it, so I apologize in advance if it doesn't provide you the full scope of what you need. But with that out of the way, let's try it out. So we're going to begin by using import and calling Camelot. We're going to hit enter, and then we are going to get the file ID of our PDF. So we're going to hit space, we're going to hit enter, we're going to do PDF_ID, and we're going to set it equal to an empty string. So we're going to go back to our file here, or if you have a PDF, that's totally cool, but we just need to get it into Drive. So I'm going to download my PDF. You'll notice that my PDF is going to be like 44 pages long. I don't know if it shows up in here, but it's a very large file. So I'm going to export it. Now, one of the fringe issues that I had was relative to these columns over here. When I was researching it and I had them in automatic alignment, which I think was to the right, this was throwing off, I think it was like set up like this. This was throwing off when reading into the PDF. I think what Camelot's doing, I've read their documentation briefly, but I didn't go line by line. I think it's kind of like lining up the relative placement of the values in the PDF. So it's basically like, I think because these values are hard right like this, it thinks that this white space here was actually a column. So there might be a way to fine tune Camelot to stop it from doing that. What I found was the most effective was just centering these values here, and then I didn't have any issues. Now, that's fine for me and this lesson, but if you're working with PDFs where it's like you get a financial statement every month from a third-party vendor, you may not have the flexibility to say to them like, hey, can you clean up your columns for me? So if you are running into that, I am very eager to hear about it, and I would gladly try and help you as best as I can. So we're going to go back to Drive now. We're just going to move forward with this. I'm going to use Shift U, and we're going to select PDF. I'm going to open it. We're going to do the same thing basically that we did with CSVs. So we're going to click this, and then instead of clicking share, I'm just going to copy the link here. And this is where you can see I have 44 pages. So I'm going to click out because we don't need it. I'm going to close this down, and I'm going to go back to my notebook. I am going to paste the link into the PDF ID, and then I'm going to remove the portions of the string that I do not need so that I just have the ID of the file. Next, we are going to, again, quote unquote, create the file in runtime. So we are going to call this file underscore download, and we're going to set it equal to drive dot create file. And then we're going to pass a dictionary. Same thing where we're going to use ID. We're going to go to the right of single quotes. We're going to add colon. We're going to hit space. And now we're going to pass PDF underscore ID. And as a refresher, this drive method is coming from the PyDrive library that allows us to access Google Drive and read files from it. So next we are going to access the file from runtime. So we're going to do file underscore download dot capital G get capital C content capital F file, and then we're going to use parentheses. We're going to use single quotes, and then this is where we're going to name our PDF. So I'm going to call this report.pdf. And I'm actually going to open up my files again. And I am going to run my cell now. And as long as we don't have any errors, we should see a PDF appear in our files here. So I'm going to hit refresh and then check it out. We got report.pdf. So we've now saved the PDF, or we've created a PDF using the file that we uploaded to Drive. So report.pdf is a virtual recreation of the file that we uploaded. So you can call this, again, whatever you want to. That's just what I went with. So next, we are going to read the tables from the PDF file. Now again, this research also presumes that you have clean tables within your PDF. Mine is just an export of a Google Sheet. If you're working with financial data, you might have multiple tables on your page. So, I only have one table, unfortunately. I'm going to give you some recommendations on how you can kind of move through them. But that might be something that you need to massage. So what we're going to do is we're going to call a table variable, and we're going to set it equal to camelot.read underscore PDF. So we are going to use whatever we called our PDF. So mine is report.pdf. Whatever yours says over here is what you're going to pass in here. So the first argument is going to be the PDF. The second argument is going to be the number of pages that you want to use. So the way that I figured out how to use this was just by reading the documentation. So for example, if you have, in my case, 44 pages, but you only want one, then you just enter pages and then set it equal to 1. You can see you also have the ability here to do multiple pages. So you could do pages 1, 3, or 4, or you could do 1, 4, and then to end, or you can also do all. And I apologize, I entered this as a number. It looks like you have to enter it as a string. So I'm going to pass pages 1. And then there's this one thing here that I still haven't figured out, is this flavor argument, where basically it has two different values. It defaults to lattice or lattice. I apologize, I don't know how that's pronounced. So if you don't enter anything, then it will be lattice. And you can see down here it's saying read PDF and return extracted tables, note keyword arguments. I believe that's what QARG stands for. Annotated with blank can only be used with the flavor stream, whereas ones annotated with an asterisk can only be lattice. I don't totally know what that means. So if you do know, please let me know so we can all benefit from it. But for my purposes, I had to set flavor equal to stream. So if stream doesn't work for you, try removing flavor or setting it to lattice. But I think by default, it is lattice. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to close these files over here because I don't need them. I just kind of want you to see what we're working with here. So I'm going to print table. And you can see our output is table list and then number equals 1. So I think the reason that I'm getting n equals 1 is because I only have one table. So if you have more than one table, you might be getting n2 or n3 relative to the number of tables that you have. But again, I haven't done a ton of research on this, so I apologize if that's not a correct understanding of it. So what I'm going to do now is, because this is a table list, I'm going to try and access it using square brackets the same way that we do anytime we have a list. So I'm going to try running it again. And you can see now I'm getting my table shape, where I believe that means that I have 32 rows and 6 columns. So just to kind of check it out, I'm going to do that thing where I'm going to do 1, 2 and see if we can get more than 2 pages in there. But we're still getting the same shape of 32 and 6. So I'm going to remove that, and I've learned my lesson. We're not going to do anything fancy. So we're going to do table square bracket 0, and then I'm going to do dot data frame or dot df, which stands for data frame. And hopefully what we're going to get is a data frame. And that's great, right? So you can see we are getting the correct number of columns, right? So our data frame is 0 indexed on both axes, which means that our quote unquote columns or headers are appearing in our values. That's not ideal for my purposes, so I'm going to show you how to clean it up. But the good thing is that we don't have that issue that I was talking about, where I was originally getting two more columns for inventory and gross revenue, where inventory was blank and gross revenue was blank, and then these values had no header. So if you are running into it, that's the fringe issue that I'm talking about. So now what we're going to do is a little minor surgery. We want to access this row so that we can save it as headers and then rewrite it as our column heads. After we save this row, we are going to delete it, and then we're going to reset our index so that the first value is 0 instead of being 1. Because remember, data frames are 0 indexed. Same thing with lists and list of lists. So I'm going to close this down, and then we are going to save this print statement to a variable. So I'm going to delete it. You don't have to delete it. You can use it if you want to. So I'm going to delete this, and then I am going to extract my table. So I'm going to call this extract, and I'm going to set it equal to tables square bracket 0.df. Same thing that we just printed. I'm going to scroll down just a little bit, so you're going to be losing this import Camelot. Hopefully you've already done that. Next thing that we're going to do is isolate the first row. So we are going to save that row to a variable, which I'm going to call headers. I'm going to set that equal to our extract variable dot iloc square bracket 0. So I'm going to print this just so you can see. You don't have to, but feel free to if you want to. So you can see that once we compile our headers, oh, what happened here? Oh, it's because I said tables instead of table. My apologies. So once I clean that up and we compile it, you can see now I'm getting that first row, which is exactly what I wanted. And now that we have that first row saved to a variable, we can drop the first row. So we are going to reuse our extract variable, and we are going to set it equal to extract.drop, and then we're going to use parentheses, and then we're going to use a square bracket 0, and then I'm going to print extract to ensure that we don't have those headers anymore. Looks great. So now what we want to do is I'm going to close this, and I'm going to scroll down a little bit. So we're going to scroll all the way down to here. If there's anything on the screen that you still want to consult, pause the video. Otherwise, I'm going to start scrolling. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is add the first row as headers. So we are going to redeclare extract as being equal to extract.rename. And then we are going to say columns is equal to our headers variable. And then we are going to do .reset, ._index, and use an open parentheses. And then we're going to say drop is equal to capital T true. So the reason that we're doing this portion here is because if we don't, then our index, our data set will start at 1 instead of 0. So just so you can see it, leave yours. I'm going to copy it and delete it, and I'm going to print extract. And you can see we've now successfully written our first row to the headers. So it's like we could actually call these column names if we wanted to, but you can see our index now starts at 1. So if we do want a 0 index, we can do reset _index, open parentheses, drop equals true. The reason that we do drop equals true is because if we don't, then we're going to have another column that says index, whereas we just kind of want a 0 index over here. And now we've successfully read our data from the PDF, and now we could start, if we wanted to, we could start calling these columns like this, where now I'm just isolating the extracts country column, same way as we did in our other lesson. Cool. So like I said, this isn't a perfect solution, but I thought it'd be helpful to share, if nothing else, to kind of just give somebody else an opportunity to, continue digging deeper into how to use this library. Generally speaking, I think these are the primary ways that, you're going to need to manage data for work using Pandas. I have a fundamentals video, if you want to dive into that, and I hope to kind of craft some more tutorials and lessons based on this type of stuff. So please reach out in the comments. Let me know if there's anything you want to learn, anything you think I missed. I think the few things that I missed in here was, a big one, which was leveraging these strategies and workflows outside of Google Collaboratory. So I am going to record a video that uses PyCharm. So I'm going to show you how to download credentials from Google Cloud Platform. I might make a video on how to access data from SharePoint. So if you are using, if you're on Office and all that type of stuff, that might be helpful. And then I think also learning how to extract data from an Excel file that's been uploaded to Google Drive. But yeah, I use a lot of this stuff, the Google Sheet and the CSV file functions, strategies pretty much daily. So if you are interested in learning more, if you have any questions, please reach out in the comments. My email is available in my About section. I love hearing from you, so please don't hesitate to reach out. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed it, and hopefully you'll watch the next one.